Welcome to the Answer is Yes podcast, where we interview some of the most interesting people that have said yes to opportunities in their life. We hope that through these stories, you can learn to create your own destiny by saying yes along the way. Join us as we explore the new series covering topics such as passion, integrity, and hard work. I'm your host, Jim Riley, and I hope you enjoy these interviews as much as I do. I believe that everyone has an important message worth hearing. Today I have Alan Lazaros on the show from the Hyper Conscious podcast. Not only is he a podcaster, but he's also a public speaker and a coach. And Alan has a very compelling story in terms of the guy that had it all on the outside, good looks, health, wealth, fitness, etc. But on the inside, he was hurting. And he talks about that story today. But more importantly, he talks about his life-changing experience and his ability to help others. And I absolutely love the story that he tells, but more importantly, I love who Alan is as a person. And it was proven to me immediately after getting off the show with him and going about my day, and I received a voicemail from him thanking me for having him on the show. And I could just tell how genuine and sincere he was and how much he really does want to help other people and get them on the pursuit of happiness and all those things that we strive for. So please enjoy this show as I interview Alan Lazaros. Hello and welcome to the Answer Yes podcast. Hope you're having a wonderful week so far. I've got Alan Lazaros on the phone. Just wanted to hear his life story. I read about you, Alan, on your website, and I was introduced to you by probably your great publicist out there, Amy. But man, thank you for being on, and we'd love to hear your story. How are you today?
I am doing awesome. I'm very honored to be here, and yeah, let's dive deep into this stuff.
Well, and I know you've got your own show and training programs and all these great things that you guys do, you and your partner, Kevin. So maybe this is just flipping the tide on you a little bit. But, you know, we like to share our stories about where things started for us in our business careers on this show. And I'd love to kind of get a little bit of your background and kind of where you grew up at and some of your early decisions you made in your life, if you don't mind sharing.
I would absolutely love to. So I grew up in a small town of Uxbridge, Massachusetts. It's right on the border of Massachusetts and Rhode Island, smack dab in the middle of Worcester and Providence, if anyone's familiar with that area. And I grew up basically, I was raised by two mothers. I had an older sister, and then my mom, and my father passed away when I was 2 years old. So I was raised by women, which has become a huge blessing in adulthood, I realize, in hindsight.
Yeah,
but exactly. So for a really long time, one of the things that, again, your podcast is The Answer is Yes, and it asked in the one sheet kind of like, what are some of the things you said yes to? And one of the things that jumped off the page immediately was, number one, I've always been like pretty enthusiastic about dreams even before I knew it. And one thing that I really owe a lot to my mother about is she never really took the wind out of my sails. I remember so many vivid memories of like, basically, me and my buddy across the table, we're like 11 years old, and we're talking about starting a company called Lazaros, and we're going to create a video game called Musket, the American Revolution. And my mom was just like really putting wind into our sails and letting us brainstorm. And then I remember when I was 8 years old, she took me past WPI, which my uncle at the time was the track coach there. As a matter of fact, since he's passed away, the track is actually named after him. And I remember her saying, Alan, this is an incredible school. Like, you could go there one day. So I didn't know it at the time because I was just a kid. But now as an adult, I owe her everything when it comes to, like, really believing in me and getting me to believe in my own brighter future. Yeah. And she also, one of the mistakes that she thinks she made was not focusing enough on academics and not focusing enough on education. Mistakes that I think my mom believed that she made is that she didn't focus enough on education. She was basically the third child, but her parents had her when they were in their mid-40s, so they didn't really focus a lot. And she was very beautiful, so they thought, oh, she'd get married and she'd have kids, and that's what she'd do. And so my mom's incredibly, incredibly talented, but didn't really have the degrees or the opportunities that she wishes she had, especially after she lost my father. Mm-hmm. And so basically she took me past WPI, and she said, Alan, this is an incredible school. You can go there. When we're kids, we kind of get praised for certain things and then criticized for others. And I was always praised for being good at math. So I was really good in academics. I basically got like 1 B+ in all of high school. And it's unfortunate because I think the education system is set up in a way where it's like people that are good and book smart get valued and appreciated, and then people that aren't book smart or quote unquote good in that, but they're maybe more practical, don't always get the praise they need. But long story short is I was really good at math. I focused on math, and I decided I wanted to be an electrical and computer engineer. So I went to WPI, which is basically like a mini MIT. It's actually in Worcester, so it's 30 minutes north of where I grew up, and I did electrical and computer engineering. What's interesting is that in high school came really easy to me, and yeah, I worked hard, but for the most part, academics was always fairly easy for me. I feel like I was fairly intelligent. Now, when you go to WPI, all of a sudden, everyone is unreasonably intelligent, and so it's kind of like a wake-up call of, oh, my goodness. So my engineering degree was unbelievably challenging, and again, what did I say yes to? So I said yes to go into WPI. So that's the first thing. Then I went into corporate America. So I worked as an engineer, and I quickly realized that I flourish in an environment where I get to talk to people and talk a lot. What a coincidence. Now I'm a podcaster and a speaker.
Yeah.
But I moved into an MBA directly out of my engineering degree. And then I did a ton of job hopping, a ton of soul searching. And basically I worked in corporate America for a long time. I worked as an electrical and computer engineer. Then I moved on to product management at a company called iRobot. Then I did global product management at a company called Sensata Technologies, which used to be Texas Instruments. I worked for companies called Oz Development, Tyco Safety Products. And then eventually I landed at a company called Cognex, where I was doing inside sales. So I formed an inside sales team there. They had this incredible referral program. So I brought all my WPI friends, not all of them, but many of them, and got these really big bonuses, got this great team together, and we started really flourishing because they were in the industrial automation space. They did machine vision technology. The higher-ups saw how ambitious I was, and they immediately promoted me to outside sales, not immediately, but after like a year, because they saw how basically I could interact with others and get people in, and I made a lot of money with this referral program. So they saw that I was ambitious, and they wanted to put fuel in that fire. So then I worked in outside sales. Now, the reason I'm saying this is because this leads up to that real turning point in my life where it's interesting because in college, I kind of skipped over this part, but I did really well in academics, but I also partied a lot. Mm-hmm. Then I went to a company called Cognex, and there it was work hard, play hard. Yeah. And it's an incredible company, and I take nothing from them. I'm super grateful for my mentors there. But like that work hard, play hard, they really do mean that. And sales, sometimes it involves, going out late at night, stuff like that, and alcohol tends to be a fairly common thing. So after college, college, I did a lot of partying. Then I went into a career that didn't necessarily discourage partying. And at this point, I was really starting to decline in my health, and this will all circle back. So,
yeah, let me ask you about that. I don't mean to cut you off, but let me ask you about that real quick because, a lot of us don't understand once we graduate college or we take that big career jump, the entertainment side of those roles. And you clearly pointed out that work hard, play hard was a component of that career. And I've been in the alcohol business most of my life, and that is a critical component of what we do. But it really can not only take its toll on you physically from a health standpoint, but also suffering in your work product and allowing it to get away from you. And it's really, it's a necessary evil, but it's also an unfortunate thing. How did you manage that, and how did you realize, hey, this is taking a toll? Because when you're young, it's nice to have a good time, especially when you're working.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting because it's part of the sales culture in a lot of different companies, and it's certainly part of the college culture, obviously. And I don't want to say, there's many good things about it, so I don't want to say it was all bad. But one of the things that I did have to say yes to eventually was my sobriety, because it did become so common. I guess we all have to be careful of what becomes normal. And what's interesting is that in sales, the more social you are, and the more you interact with others, and the more you're a chameleon, and a lot of times the more success you get, and then the more praise you get for that success. So it becomes this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy of like, okay, well, I'm having fun, I'm working really hard, I'm playing really hard, and I'm winning for not only myself, but the entire team, because as you know, sales is obviously about making money. Yeah. And I just feel like I was naturally good at all of those things. And eventually I basically so the turning point was basically so how did I transition out of the alcohol thing? I think I remember when I was 160 pounds, skinny fat alcoholic. And I say that because I wanted to, on the outside, I literally did have what everyone thinks is quote unquote successful, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a master's degree. I had a bachelor's degree. I worked for a tier 1 technical institution. I made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Like, I had the beautiful, beautiful girlfriend. I had, more money than I knew what to do with at the time. I remember going to the casino once, like with $3,000 in my pocket and having like basically saying to all my friends on my 26th birthday, like if I lost all this, it literally wouldn't matter at all. I wouldn't lose a second of sleep over it.
Yeah.
I remember they thought that was really cool. But what they didn't know is the truth, which was that I didn't even know it. I was really not happy. I certainly wasn't fulfilled, and I certainly wasn't healthy. And I think that's the main thing. So when it all turned around for me, there's actually 2 pivotal moments for me. One was when I was in Providence. I was at the Providence Place Mall with my best friend growing up, and I got jumped by a schizophrenic. So I'm paying for parking. It was a Sunday night. We weren't at the bar. We weren't doing anything crazy. It was a Sunday night. There was little kids around in a very well-lit area just trying to pay for parking. And all of a sudden, I get hit in the face from behind. And I turn around, and I see this guy's eyes, and I literally am like, okay, one of 2 things is happening right now, the ultimate fight or flight response. So either he thinks I'm someone I'm not, and he thinks I'm in some gang or something, or he is crazy. Mm-hmm. And it turned out it was the second one. But I knew immediately this dude would kill me if he could. Like, you could see it in his eyes. And later on, it turns out he told the cops that we were trying to kill him, but it turns out he was a schizophrenic who didn't take his medication.
Yeah, wow.
So my buddy Kiki pushes him off me. I run. So fight or flight, I chose flight. My buddy Kiki chose neither. Now, the reason I chose flight is I thought for sure Kiki would do that too, because growing up together, like, we'd always run away when we heard a coyote or whatever. So I thought he'd run. Long story short, my buddy got his butt kicked pretty bad black eyes and stuff. I eventually circled back. Someone fortunately pulled the fire alarm, got the schizophrenic to come out of his rage, and then the cops basically got him, and he ended up telling them that we tried to kill him. So it was a whole thing. Mm-hmm. But that was a real wake-up call for me, because it was like, again, life or death type of situation. Like, let's say he had a knife, I'd be dead for sure, 100%. So what's interesting, too, is we went to see the movie 300, and it's like, why is a schizophrenic seeing the movie 300 without his medication? It's a whole thing. Okay, so 6 months later, and when something like that happens, you try to make sense of it. Like, what part did I play in this? Mm-hmm. Like, what can I do differently in the future? And so this is when I started really getting into fitness, believe it or not, because I said to myself, if that ever happens again, I'm not running. I'm going to defend myself, and I'm going to be strong enough to do it. So this is when I started really hitting the weights. 6 months fast forward. I changed the fitness thing, but I didn't change much else. Now I'm up in New Hampshire, and I'm with my little cousin, and we're driving to TGI Fridays. The road stayed left. I thought it stayed right. I was looking down at the GPS, and I was supposed to yield, and I didn't. Mm-hmm. I end up on the other side of the road, and I look up, and there's a lift-kitted truck, like a big truck with these brightest lights I've ever seen. And I'll never forget this moment. It was like the scariest moment of my life. And I literally remember thinking to myself, like, oh, my God, this is it. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I was driving a 2004 Volkswagen Passat, which is like a German steel trap. It's a very, very powerful car. Like, I used to call it the tank. And I literally, in my presentations, I show pictures of it. It was absolutely mangled. But somehow me and my little cousin were not hurt. He was 17, and he hurt his knee, and I hurt my face on the airbag. But all the airbags went off. Thank you so much, Volkswagen. So later that night, I'm drinking whiskey in an armchair, and he's 17, so he's already tweeting about it, like, oh my God, like, got in a car accident. He's getting all this, this attention from he's the 17-year-old invincible part of him, right? Mm-hmm. Is still very there. Whereas with me, my father passed away in a car accident when he was 28 years old. At the time, I'm 26 years old, and this messed with me so much.
Oh, I can imagine.
I literally questioned everything, Jim. So I tell this story to this day because now in hindsight, I'm so glad that happened. But at the time, I always call it shaking the snow globe. Things will happen, whether it's the death of a loved one, the death of a pet, maybe you have an illness that's life-threatening. You get your snow globe shaken, and you have to ask yourself the tough questions of, like, did I live my full potential?